Hi, I'm Darlene. This story begins on my daughter's 13th birthday, the day everything looked perfect, but nothing really was. My sister sent cookies, my mother had comments, and I kept pretending the cracks in our family weren't deepening. But what if the party wasn't the beginning? Just the first time I stopped ignoring it. Have you ever realized the silence in your family was actually a warning sign? Let me know in the comments. I woke up before the sun that morning. The house was still, the kind of stillness that makes you whisper even when you're alone. I moved through the kitchen like a checklist: table linens, candles, name cards, balloon weights. Everything was planned, everything perfect. Except me. Something about the air felt off, like I was acting in a play I'd written myself and couldn't remember why. Boulder was turning gold and red. Fall in this part of Colorado is almost performative. Neat piles of leaves, front porch pumpkins, coffee in ceramic mugs that look better on Instagram than they taste in real life. I set the cake knife down on the counter and exhaled slowly. Harlow was 13 today. Her party would start in 5 hours. I remembered last year. Marla couldn't come. She texted late, said her shift changed, said sorry, but she sent a cake, homemade. No brand, no glossy bakery label, just foil and frosting, slightly uneven, but made with her hands. Ruth Ann unwrapped it with her signature tight-lipped smile and said, just loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "Well, I guess this one's from the clearance section." A few polite laughs followed. I didn't join in, but I didn't stop it either. I had placed that cake off to the side, served the one I ordered from Jackson and Poppy's, with the fondant ribbon and edible gold dust. I remember thinking that Marla wouldn't care, that she would have done the same, but she never asked how the party went, and I never brought it up. Now, as I tucked Harlow's school certificates into a cream envelope for Ruth Ann, I felt the weight of something I couldn't quite name. Not guilt exactly. More like the awareness of having let something rot in the fridge too long and pretending it wasn't there. Ruth Ann loved bragging rights. She would show Harlow's awards to her book club, then tuck them into her drawer like trophies she earned. Marla never got that treatment, not even when Julian made honor roll last fall. Ruth Ann said, "Well, maybe that school just lowered their standards." I used to laugh. Quietly, sure, but I still laughed. A memory hit me as I folded the flap down on the envelope. 2 years ago, I overheard a group of Julian's classmates mocking the cookies Marla sent for his class party. "Are these made of sadness?" one kid asked. Another whispered, "It smells like expired butter." Julian chuckled along, eyes down. I remember thinking, at least he's not crying. Now I realize that might have been worse. The kettle hissed. I poured my tea into the white cup Craig got me last Mother's Day, the one with a faint chip on the rim. As I lifted it, I noticed my hands, veins visible, nails tidy, skin dry around the knuckles. My mother's hands. Marla's hands, in contrast, had always looked like she worked a double shift. Red, cracked, lotion-resistant. I remember her tucking them into her sleeves during cold months. She said it was for the weather. I believed her. The phone buzzed. 5 o'clock, right? Ruth Ann asked. Yes, Mom. Make sure Harlow wears that blue dress, the one that makes her look smarter. Okay? I hung up and stared at my tea. Smart. Not joyful, not creative, smarter. I slid the envelope across the table, then stopped. I didn't seal it, just placed it in the drawer next to the measuring spoons. The ache from last year's comment still sat somewhere in my chest. But the ache from Marla's silence, that one wrapped itself around my spine, quiet and constant. My phone vibrated again. A text from Marla. "Don't worry," it read. "I'm sending something special this year, too." The kitchen smelled like toast and vanilla creamer, that quiet scent of a too-perfect morning. I was scrambling eggs, scanning emails on my phone, nodding at Harlow's casual chatter about school clubs. She was sitting at the island counter, kicking her socked feet against the bar stool. Her report card was still sitting where she left it last night, slightly bent at the corner. Craig walked in, hair damp from the shower, coffee in hand. He paused just long enough to glance down at the paper. "She's smart," he said, smiling at her. "Just like her mom." Harlow beamed. I didn't. I froze mid-pour, cream swirling in my mug like smoke trapped in a jar. Something about the way he said it. So light, so easy. landed too loud in my ears. I didn't respond. I just stirred. That night, the house was full of voices. Not laughter, not really noise, just presence. Plates clinked, forks scraped. Harlow was talking about swim practice, about the new coach who smelled like sunscreen year-round. Julian sat at the edge of the couch. He hadn't said a word since he arrived. When I passed him a bowl of mac and cheese, he nodded but didn't eat. Marla was quieter than usual, too, eyes on her lap, only lifting her head to say thank you once. I noticed, but I told myself not to make it a thing. A few days later, while driving Harlow to a library meetup, she mentioned it casually. Julian didn't do his history presentation, she said, scrolling through her messages. Said he wasn't feeling great. I didn't reply at first, just stared ahead at the traffic light, fingers tightening around the wheel. He had worked on that project for weeks. And now? Nothing? The phrase from earlier came back to me, Craig's voice echoing across the breakfast counter, just like her mom. I wondered how many times Julian had heard that in some form, not directly, but always there. Words hanging in the air, drawn in invisible chalk. The smart one, the golden child, the afterthought. I remembered being 13, holding a test with a C+ on it. Ruth Ann glanced at it once before walking past me to congratulate Marla on her piano solo. She's got real artistic instincts, she'd said. I had nodded, pretended I didn't care. I never played anything again. Maybe that's when it started. The subtle separation. One daughter gifted, the other capable. That evening we sat down to dinner again. Same table, same people. Harlow was glowing from a science quiz result. Julian pushed peas around his plate like they'd wronged him. Marla gave me a small thank you for the meal and excused herself early, saying they had to stop by the store on the way home. I caught Julian's eyes before they left, but he didn't hold my gaze. He just looked past me, like I was part of the wall. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. On the nightstand sat Harlow's Outstanding Achievement Award from last spring. Still in the gold frame, Ruth Ann insisted I keep on display. I picked it up, traced the cheap plastic edges with my thumb. She's smart, just like her mom. I placed it face down, then I reached for my phone. Next time, I typed to Craig, let's not say things like that in front of Julian. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, and nothing else came. She didn't text before coming. I just opened the door and there she was. Marla, standing on the porch in a thin hoodie, holding an old envelope between her fingers like it weighed more than it should. Can we talk? She asked. I stepped aside. We sat at the kitchen table without touching the mugs I'd placed out of habit. The air between us wasn't tense. It was something else, denser. Like we'd both swallowed too many words and couldn't afford to open our mouths. She slid the envelope across the table without a word. I looked down. The flap was already open. I pulled out the photo. A birthday, maybe 6 or 7 years ago. Harlow's 3rd. She was in the center, surrounded by cake and chaos. Craig was behind her. I was on one side, Ruth Ann on the other, and the far right edge, cut cleanly with scissors, a face missing. I didn't need to guess whose. I used to think I was making it up, Marla said, her voice calm. That maybe I was just being sensitive. But that's how I remember it. You all framed it like I was never there. I opened my mouth, but sorry felt too small. I was late, she added. I remember that. I had just gotten off my shift. I didn't even get to change. Mom told me to step aside so Harlow could be in the center. She looked down at the table. So I stepped aside, and I guess I never stepped back in. I reached for the photo, but didn't touch it. That night, while searching Ruth Ann's hallway cabinet for serving trays, I found a small envelope labeled 2009. I almost left it alone, but something tugged. Inside was the uncut version, same photo. But this time, Marla was there, slightly blurred, still in her work apron, hair pulled into a messy ponytail. But she was smiling, wide, unfiltered, the kind of smile you give when you think someone might be glad you showed up. It hit me, sharper than guilt. I had only ever seen the cropped version. It sat in Ruth Ann's living room for years, in a dark wooden frame. I'd walked past it hundreds of times, and never once noticed the edge, the missing space, the story it didn't tell. I stood in the hallway for a long time. How many things had I accepted as fact just because they didn't hurt me? The next morning, I scanned the full version. I printed it on thick photo paper, slid it into a new envelope, and mailed it to Marla. No message, no explanation. I didn't call, I didn't text. But I did something else. I took the framed photo off my mother's wall while she was outside trimming her roses, replaced it with one of Harlow and Julian from the science fair. They were laughing. No one was centered. No one was cropped. A week later, Ruth Ann came into the living room with a cup of tea. She paused in front of the photo, didn't say a word, but she noticed. The drive home from swim practice was quiet, the kind of silence that usually meant Harlow was either tired or thinking. I let it be. The sky outside was the soft kind of pink that made the mountains look gentle, like they'd folded in for the night. As we waited at a red light, she said, "Julian helped me on that project. The one with the trench warfare thing? The one you said was your favorite." I blinked. I hadn't known. "Oh," I said, trying to sound casual. "Did he?" She nodded, then pulled her hoodie over her head and rested her chin on the seatbelt strap. That was all she said. At dinner, she opened up more. Craig had a work call, so it was just us and the leftover pasta from Monday. "He's really into World War I," she said between bites. "Not just the battles, like the reasons, the psychology." He said something like, "People don't go to war for land. They go because they're told to." I didn't know whether to be impressed or heartbroken. "He listens a lot," she added. "I like that. Most people wait for their turn to talk. He doesn't." I nodded, tried to smile, but inside I felt something twist, soft but undeniable. Julian had helped her, thoughtfully, quietly, and no one told me. Not Marla, not Julian, not even Harlow until now. I couldn't stop thinking about that. That night, somewhere across town, Julian sat on his bed with a sketchpad open beside him. The lens cap of his camera sat neatly on top. His phone buzzed. He didn't tell his mom he'd helped Harlow. He never would. She'd twist it, he thought. Make it about her. Say I was sucking up. Say I needed her. She'd make it small. He picked up his phone. "Hope you get a good grade," he texted. Harlow replied with a single-star emoji. I remembered 8th grade, Marla helping me cram for a math quiz. I hadn't told Ruth Ann. She'd just said the day before, "Marla is sweet but not exactly academic." And I believed her. Not because it was true, but because it was easier than arguing. That's how it starts, I think. The letting go. The deciding what's worth telling and what isn't. I walked past Harlow's room around 10. Her lamp was still on. She was reading a printout, highlighter cap between her teeth. I glanced down at the margin. Julian's handwriting. Blocky but careful. Focus on the why, not just the what. It was better advice than anything I'd said to her this month. I wanted to knock, to say something, but she looked so calm, so sure. Instead, I went downstairs. I opened the school website, pulled up the gallery from the science fair, and found the photo. The two of them, sitting on the floor in front of their display, sharing a pack of gummy worms. Unposed, light in their eyes. I printed it, framed it, placed it on the hallway table, right between the baby grand piano and Ruth Ann's wedding portrait. The next day, Marla stopped by to drop off a bag of hand-me-downs for Harlow. She walked through the hallway like always, but this time she paused. Her eyes landed on the frame. She didn't say anything, but she noticed. The envelope was plain, no return address, no stamp, just a crease in the top corner and a name scribbled in faded ink. Mine, Darlene. It didn't come in the mail, it was slid under the door like a whisper. Inside was a photo. No note, no handwriting. Just a picture from some time I couldn't immediately place. Marla and me as girls. I had pigtails. She had that messy braid Mom never fixed properly. We were sitting at a picnic table, chewing on watermelon slices, our mouths red and sticky. Ruth Ann's hand was visible on the edge of the frame, holding a camera. I turned it over. Nothing. Not even a date. The silence of it hurt more than anything Ruth Ann might have written. I stood there at the counter, holding it by the corners, like it might disintegrate if I pressed too hard. I didn't know whether to feel remembered or warned. I set it down, walked away, came back, picked it up again, and then the phone rang. Marla's name blinked on the screen. I almost didn't answer. Did you get one too? She asked, skipping hello. I swallowed. Yeah. I called her, said I got it. She didn't say anything, just breathed. Then the line went dead. There was a long pause. I don't know what that's supposed to mean, Marla said. Her voice didn't sound angry, just tired. I don't either, I admitted. We didn't talk about the photo again. But that night, after Harlow went to bed and Craig was still at the office, I opened the bottom drawer of the sideboard in the dining room, the one where Mom used to keep holiday napkins and emergency birthday candles. The same drawer I used to dig through for spare batteries. I laid the photo inside. No frame, no folder, just placed it flat, under a clean dish towel. It didn't belong on the wall, but it didn't belong in the trash either. I sat at the kitchen table after, my tea untouched, watching the steam fade until there was nothing left. Years ago, I sat at this same table with Ruth Ann. I was 16. Marla had just been grounded for skipping math class. I remember Ruth Ann saying, "Your sister has to toughen up, she'll never survive otherwise." I nodded then, thinking that was wisdom. Now, I wonder if it was just surrender. An excuse to be less kind. I opened the hallway window before bed. The wind had shifted, carrying in that dry Colorado chill that meant fall was beginning to bow toward winter. I leaned into it, eyes closed, breathing deep, and I heard it. Not words, just a breath. Ruth Ann's breath. The same one Marla had described on the phone. A sigh that meant nothing, or maybe everything. That night, I dreamed of the kitchen we grew up in. The chipped tiles, the yellow bowl, a smell of cinnamon and something burning. Ruth Ann was at the counter, but it was Marla stirring the bowl. The voicemail clicked on by accident. I hadn't meant to hear it. I was trying to check a call from the dry cleaner and hit the wrong button. The message was old, weeks, maybe months, but the voice came through clear, cracked at the edges. "He's just a burden," Marla said. "I can't keep doing this." She was rushed, breathless. Maybe she didn't know she was being recorded. Or maybe she didn't care. I stood frozen, the phone still in my hand, the message still replaying in my head. I deleted it, but I knew. I wasn't the only one who'd heard it. Julian had. And somehow, that made it worse. I remembered a family picnic 2 summers ago. Harlow had a ham sandwich and a banana. Craig had brought chips. I'd packed extras. Marla and Julian arrived late, flustered. No lunch in sight. "He said he wasn't hungry," Marla mumbled. Julian sat under a tree alone with a bottle of water. I believed her then. Now I wasn't so sure. The next morning I went to the fridge to grab milk. That's when I saw it. A piece of notebook paper torn unevenly, taped right next to an old grocery list. The handwriting was Julian's. "I don't need your pity, just your eyes. Look at me once." The ink was bold, not angry, not messy, just certain. No one in the house said anything about it. Marla walked past it 3 times that day, never flinched, but the note stayed. I thought about ripping it down. Not because I disagreed, but because it felt too exposed, too raw, like a window cracked in winter. Instead, I poured coffee and sat at the counter. Watching the light shift on the tile floor, I asked Harlow, "Do you think Julian's okay?" She looked up from her cereal. "He's quiet, like inside quiet." It was the most accurate thing I'd heard in weeks. That night I couldn't stop looking at that note. I kept walking past the fridge like it was a memorial, or a warning. I thought about all the times I had mistaken silence for survival, for strength. Now it looked like erosion, slow, patient, inevitable. And when it comes, no one notices until the floor caves in. So the next morning, while Ruth Ann was outside watering her hydrangeas, I walked into her kitchen. Her fridge, like everything else in that house, was immaculate. Magnetized calendars. A photo of Harlow with her first swim ribbon. A faded "You are enough" quote she printed from Facebook 5 years ago and never took down. I took out a pen, copied Julian's words in my own handwriting. "I don't need your pity, just your eyes. Look at me once." I folded the note, taped it beside the grocery list she kept clipped to the side with a wooden clothespin. I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. That evening, Marla stopped by to drop off a casserole dish. She walked into Ruth Ann's kitchen like she always did. But this time she paused. Her eyes landed on the fridge, one note, then another, same words, two hands, no explanations. But this time, she noticed. It was past midnight when I stepped into the kitchen. The house was still, save for the hum of the fridge and the faint clicking of the baseboard heater. I didn't bother with the lights. I didn't need them. The jar was on the top shelf, behind the cake stand we only used for Easter. I reached up, pulled it down gently, and unscrewed the lid. The scent was off. Not spoiled, just wrong. Butter and something bitter underneath, like plastic left too close to heat. I took one cookie out, turned it over, pressed the center with my thumb. It crumbled too easily. I didn't panic. I took a photo, labeled the lid, received from Marla, October 8th. I didn't plan to call anyone. I didn't plan to eat them either. I slid the jar into the back of the fridge, behind the bag of frozen peas and the last of Craig's leftover curry. Not for revenge, for proof, for control. Marla once threw away my journal when we were teenagers. She said it was an accident. I never believed her. This time, I was the one keeping the record. The next morning, I sent her a message. If you're free, swing by. I have something of yours. She showed up around 5, still in her grocery store polo, hair flattened under a visor. Her eyes were shadowed but alert, like she hadn't slept well in days and was pretending that meant nothing. I led her to the dining room. The table was cleared, no centerpiece, no cups, just the jar sitting dead center on the wood. Thomas stopped by after school, I said, voice even. Said he was hungry. She froze. What? She asked, too quickly. I didn't answer. She took a step closer. Wait, Thomas ate them? I nodded, just once. Marla's face drained of color. Her breath came fast. No, he wouldn't. He knows not to. She sat down slowly, gripping the edge of the table like it was the only thing holding her upright. How many? All of them. A long silence filled the room. Not empty, just full of everything we'd never said. Then she whispered, Oh my God. Her voice cracked. I didn't want to hurt her, she said. I don't know. The meat was coming. If she skipped it, if she missed it, maybe she'd finally. She stopped. She tried to swallow the tears, but one slipped down anyway. I wasn't thinking, she said. Or maybe I was, and that's worse. I stood by the wall watching her. My hands were still. You sent something dangerous into my home, I said quietly. Marla looked up at me, eyes wide, wet, empty. I know. She waited for me to yell, or cry, or demand an explanation, but I didn't give her one. Instead, I walked to the fridge, pulled the jar from the back, and placed it in front of her. You take them, I said, and you tell me what to do next. She opened her mouth, closed it, lifted the jar, screwed the lid tight, then she stood and walked out. The house was still. Morning hadn't fully broken yet, and the only light came from the dim glow over the stove, casting long shadows across the tiled floor. I padded into the kitchen, barefoot, careful not to wake anyone. My hand brushed the back of the chair I always pulled out for Harlow, just a habit now. On the dining table, the jar sat empty. Its glass caught the faintest reflection, me. Slightly hollow-eyed, robe slipping at one shoulder, hair pulled into the same loose knot I wore to bed every night. I looked like someone who had spent a long time keeping things together. I just wanted to be a perfect mother, I whispered. I didn't expect it to come out aloud. But once it did, I knew it was the truth, and it felt less like confession, more like exposure. The image of Harlow's first straight-A report card came to mind, crisp and perfect, laminated the same week it came home. Ruth Ann had clapped like a politician sealing a deal. Now that, she said, is real parenting. I smiled then, but I remember my stomach turning, and I remember spending that night online, searching for the best corkboard to pin it to. Not because Harlow asked, but because I needed to keep the praise coming. I remembered every gold sticker, every ribbon, every photo Ruth Ann insisted I email to her friends. I remembered the way she always said, "We've got another one, a real Wyatt girl." And I remembered not once, never, had Harlow asked for more applause. At breakfast she poked at her eggs. I could tell something was building. Her fingers tapped the edge of her glass, her mouth twitching before she finally said, "Mom, next time. Can you not talk about my awards in front of my friends?" She didn't sound annoyed. She sounded tired. I nodded, but my throat locked up before I could say anything. She smiled weakly, like she knew I understood more than I let on. I did. Later, I sat in my car outside the grocery store, holding my keys but not starting the engine. A couple passed in front of my windshield, laughing about something one of them had texted. I watched them, then looked down at my hands on the wheel. The same hands that once cut crusts off Harlow's sandwiches, that typed emails to teachers, that picked out frames and trophies and high-achieving decals. And I realized I'd made being her mother a performance. One Ruth Ann would clap for, one Craig could brag about. I whispered it again. I was Ruth Ann, just quieter. That evening I took down the corkboard. It had lived in the hallway for years, filled with Harlow's best. Certificates, ribbons, medals. The weight of it wasn't in the pushpins, it was in the expectation. I replaced it with a photo I'd printed from last month's science fair. Harlow and Julian on the porch steps, a melting ice cream cone, their shoes untied. Their laughter blurred, no spotlight, just a moment. I baked a pie that night. No reason, no celebration. I texted Marla and said I had leftovers if she and Julian wanted to come by. I didn't plan a speech. I didn't set the table like it was Sunday dinner. They came, quiet, cautious, but they came. Julian stepped into the hallway and paused. He looked at the space on the wall where the corkboard used to be. Just a nail and some faded outline left. He smiled. The jar was gone. Not thrown out, not mentioned. Just gone. Like it had served its purpose and quietly dismissed itself. The dining room felt colder that week, but lighter too. As if something dense had been pulled from the center of the house and now the air had more room to move. Julian passed me in the hallway 2 days after the confrontation. He nodded. I nodded back. No one brought up the cookies. No one asked what had been in them. It didn't need saying. Some truths land better in silence. Ruth Ann came for dinner on Friday. She arrived with her usual casserole, her same perfume. But her voice was softer. The sharpness had dulled. She walked through the hallway and stopped in front of the wall where the corkboard had been. "Where are Harlow's awards?" she asked, not unkindly. "In her room," I said, "where they belong." She didn't comment, just moved on, sat at the table, ate. The conversation was small, about weather, about a neighbor's new dog, about whether the grocery store would stop carrying the coffee she liked. But something was different. The space she used to fill with directions, comparisons, judgments, she left it empty this time. Later that evening, Harlow and Julian sat on the porch sharing earbuds. I could see them through the kitchen window. Their heads leaned together, their laughter slipping through the cracks of the screen door. I didn't hear what they were saying. I didn't need to. Julian pulled one earbud out and said something that made Harlow pause, then smile. "Thanks for not treating me like a project," he said. Harlow leaned back and shrugged. "Thanks for not trying to impress me." It was the simplest kind of understanding, the kind adults often overlook. Marla hadn't come by all week, but on Saturday morning there was a small box on my doorstep, brown cardboard, no return address. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a photo, not new, not recent. It was the one she'd cut herself out of, only this time it was whole. All of us, me, Harlow, Marla, Julian. A picnic table. Sunlight that blurred the edges. Marla's face, slightly turned, smiling, not posing, no note. I held it for a long time, then I framed it. Not for the mantel, not for the hallway spotlight, just for the stairwell wall where people passed on their way up or down, where they might stop, or they might not. But it would be there either way. Maybe this is what healing looks like, I thought. Not loud, not clean, just possible. The next morning at breakfast, Harlow poured cereal and asked without looking up, "Are we going to Grandma's for Thanksgiving?" I stirred my coffee. "I don't know," I said. Then I smiled. "But I think we'll set our own table this year." Julian looked up from his toast, just a glance. But he smiled too. I didn't forgive Marla completely. But I stopped needing to. Some wounds don't ask to be healed loudly. Some just want to be seen, acknowledged, and gently carried forward. If there's anything I've learned, it's that silence doesn't always protect. It often preserves pain. We inherit patterns, but we also inherit the power to end them. I spent years believing being the strong one meant staying quiet, staying composed. But strength, I've learned, sometimes looks like speaking softly, changing course, or even leaving a corkboard blank. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever kept quiet to keep the peace, only to realize it cost you more than it saved? Have you had to unlearn love that was measured by achievement? I'd love to know your story. If this video resonated with you, drop a 1 in the comments, or tell me where you're watching from. If it didn't, let me know why. Your voice matters here. And if you want more stories that speak to the quiet places in your heart, don't forget to subscribe. I'll be here, sharing the kind of truths we're often too scared to say out loud, but never too late to hear.